Hello, everyone. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Jams D Podcast Record Club, where each week one of these fellas picks another album for the other fellas to listen to, sometimes more than one album, like this week, where we continue the saga of reviewing a very specific subgenre of music. A kind of music that I think fits into a couple of categories. You could consider this to be akin to the Evanescence video we did just a little while ago. You could go as far back as 3 Days Grace, the episode we did last year. But we're very specifically, this is a spiritual successor to our video on the Christian hip-hop artist TobyMac. Because today we're going to be talking about two different artists and the quintessential album from these two respective artists in the world of Christian radio rock. And we're reviewing two artists and albums that are on the polar opposite ends of the spectrum of sort of heaviness and the spectrum of tastefulness, I think I would argue as well. That being, of course, we're talking about Switchfoot's album, The Beautiful Letdown. We're also talking about Skillet's album, Awake. And like TobyMac, if you grew up with music like this, or grew up around where I grew up in the American South, and you listened to anything like this, or had friends who listened to stuff like this, I don't even have to introduce this stuff to you because you are already undoubtedly familiar with it. And just so as it happens, August is also here, and we get to check off another sort of album with some songs on it that contribute to the anime music video core genre of albums and songs in the form of Skillet, who has contributed to the world maybe just as many terrible, poorly edited AMVs as maybe Evanescence did. And this is not the first album from these respective artists. They sort of fostered in the same scene in either the late 90s or the early 2000s when, labels like this were starting to actually focus on Christian music and Christian rock, and specific radio stations were, now we're able to get by on solely playing this kind of music because it had crossover appeal of some kind. And this is a little bit after these specific bands have been in their respective scene. But I would argue that this album for each of them is kind of the moment where they did their genre crossover to where they would appeal to just beyond their very outset, like limited audience. So in many respects, these albums do have a very similar spiritual similarity to Welcome to Diverse City in a very, very strange kind of way.
I mean, spiritual in more ways than one.
Spiritual in every sense of the word. And we're talking about Switchfoot first. This was sort of the one that I wanted to talk about for a long time. Morgan actually mentioned it, I think, on the 3 Days Grace episode, that we should at some point talk about a Switchfoot album. And it's because they really are, I think, the quintessential Christian rock band. They are, or at least were, obscenely popular, and they're insanely prolific too. And unlike a lot of artists in this sort of area, is that they are a respectable band. I don't think that you'll find many music nerds leaping to defend their output or anything, but take a look on Rate Your Music, and they have about half of their catalog which is reviewed on the north side of favorable.
Rate Your Music is not it's not the website we want to be looking at to get
fair,
to gauge opinion on this.
This is the only gauge that we have, really, because it's when you start dealing with a niche this specific, it's like the only people that are going to seek out to review these albums are people who have already had like an affinity for them in some respects. So it might be slightly skewed in their favor. But I think
music.
Oh boy. Regardless, I think that many people would say that Switchfoot's Learning to Breathe was the album that really kind of put them on the scene, which is the one right before this one. And then the album after it, Nothing Is Sound, is sort of their last real mainstay for creative relevance beyond them making a lot of albums that nobody really cared about, successfully speaking. And until They got right up there with bands like the Newsboys for the fucking Pure Flicks, which that is an entire industry now of making Christian movies and then taking these former Christian rock stalwarts and then inserting them or their music into these films as a marketing ploy. So basically, these guys haven't made anything that is like even remotely successful or worthwhile in a solid decade, bare minimum. Their last album was 2021's Interrobang. So needless to say, Switchfoot have come and gone. But while they were here, the Beautiful Letdown was a very big album. And when I went back to listen to this, much like Welcome to Diverse City, I discovered that I knew about half of these songs down in the core of my DNA. Songs like Dare You to Move, songs like This Is Your Life, or songs like Gone, which humorously is the exact same title as a song on the Toby Mac album. And yeah, now we're here. And as somebody who is short, I'm probably going to be, I mean, the kindest. I don't really have a great word to say about either of these albums or bands, but just from my point of view, at least, Switchfoot are harmless. They are a band who, if anything else, you do not suffer the onslaught of constant God cringe. Well, they are not a Christian rock band that every other line, every other song, like it's a punchline, like with the Toby Mac album. If anything, I would say their incorporation of the faith and spirituality into their music is probably tasteful. That's not to say that they don't handle other subject material with a little bit less taste, but we'll get to that. So when I say that I think that Switchfoot is the most tolerable of the bands we've talked about in this particular ilk, I'm not praising them. I'm really, if nothing else, saying that they are, at their best, pretty aggressively ignorable. That said, there's a number of songs on here that I think that are decent. They're playing with a sound that is, if anything, derivative to a fault, just because, I don't know about you guys, but I made a Foo Fighters comp before we started recording, and frankly, this band really wants to sound like that post-grunge staple, which if you're trying to replicate success in the late 90s and early 2000s, there are worse things that you could do than model your sound after the Foo Fighters. But this is not exactly a There Is Nothing Left to Lose, if you catch my drift. So, August, Riley, The Beautiful Letdown.
I'm not going to go into it. I'll let August probably more qualified to go into it. I'll share some thoughts afterwards. But one thing I want to say, because it's relevant to what Jake just said, is that I looked on their Wikipedia page, and very much in line with what Jake was saying, John Foreman, whatever his name is, has stated that
like that
Switchfoot
John Foreskin.
He does not consider Switchfoot a Christian rock band. That he says they're Christian by faith, not genre. So like you have so to a certain extent,
that's accurate.
They don't want to be pigeonholed in the same way.
Fun fact before you get going too is that both the bands we're talking about are spearheaded by a pair of brothers, which is a complete coincidence. This is John and I think Tim Foreman, whereas Skillet's, I'll get to their name when I get
Cain and Abel.
Yeah.
This.
Maybe they shouldn't have kicked George out of the band. Yeah, can't kill me. August, what do you think of Switchfoot? And what is your relationship with Switchfoot?
Switchfoot were a band I was mostly familiar with via Pure Flicks, because I mean, of course I watch terrible Pure Flicks movies, if only to be embarrassed, like secondhand, for just everyone involved. So of course I was like, oh, this is that fucking band. And I had heard of these guys before. They're not the band we're discussing today I'm most familiar with. We'll get to them in a couple 20 minutes or so. I think the funniest realization I had because I listened to this album a couple times in preparation for this episode, and I think the funniest kind of revelation I had was, yeah, they're pretty inoffensive as far as everything goes, but the more and more I listen to this album, the more and more it just all sounds like bullshit. I'm gonna be honest.
You know, August, that's a great point to make, because I was going to say, I forgot to make this point, and that I think that this is going to be reflected in probably all of our scores in the ways that, like, this is both a compliment and an insult to this band. Is that I think the most surprising thing about it is when I listened to it is that I discovered that I didn't have to do, for lack of a better term, that I didn't have to grade on a curve. That when I label this band as mediocre and when I call all these songs bad, I'm not even saying that it's bad like for this. Like, there's no addendums. It's like I can just treat this like an album that we would review each week. I don't know why we would ever review an album like this, but I don't have to say for a this or for a that. That's not to say that they don't get away with a whole lot of bullshit on this album. They do. Well, but very specifically, this is a post 9/11 band. We've talked about this idea a lot. We even talked about it in the Toby Mac episode, but like, I feel like in the way, much like the way that Skillet both are and are not a very Christian band, in that all of their, because Jesus is in, a parenthetical, whereas here it's not because Jesus, it's because terrorism.
Because terror, yeah. That's a great point, in that a lot of the sentiment of this band, when you really start to pick into what they're talking about, their song topics, this is a band who's very much going for this kind of life-affirming positivity vibe, is generally how I describe their approach to songwriting. And that kind of optimism feels like optimism with a caveat, and that caveat is just the state of the world this band is coming from. Like, it feels like you can see the cracks in this band's sunshine. There's one moment on this album where I think that the kind of sunshine and the beauty of what they're actually going for shines through, which is, interestingly enough, the song Gone, which I think is hands down the best song on this album.
We're all in agreement then. Absolutely.
But we'll get to Gone shortly.
I think that there's no real better place to start talking about getting in the weeds about the album than the first song, which is Meant to Live, which was also a very successful radio song. I heard this song about as much as I would say I heard Dare You to Move and whatnot. And there's one thing I'll note about this album, which is very present on this song and any other song, in that when I listened to it, I was just like, why does this not sound great? And then I just kind of thought about it a little bit more, and then I unlocked it. I listened to it in my car, and I was like, wait a second. It sounds fine. What the hell's going on here? This album was mixed and mastered in a time where they were aiming for a radio audience, and I think that bled straight into the production, because if you listen to this on big, loud, cheap speakers, it sounds fine. If you listen to it on high quality headphones, the mixes of these songs kind of suck, frankly. Like, I don't know what the fuck is going on here, but every single element of the instrumentals here are just kind of ugly. Like, it's not obvious, but like, it's really stale and like kind of gross sounding.
Staticky was a word that came to my mind, where the instruments just sound kind of crackly and thin. And what's so weird about this song is it has like a faux Deftones riff, that and it's so weird because they never do anything like that on the rest of the album.
Nope.
To open with that kind of machismo big kind of riff, and it doesn't pair with the production, the fucking FM stereo ass production.
Now, listen here. I think to a certain extent to really appreciate or like unpack or understand any of this, you need to have some level of nostalgia for it. And I don't. I I am not American. I didn't grow up in the world where this was kind of omnipresent. I was fortunately sheltered from this, but that's it. So take whatever I have to say on either of these albums with big grain of salt, because I'm a stranger in a strange land here. I'm not. So I want to start with a quote from John Foreman.
You lost yourself?
I want to start with a quote from John Foreman, and it was specifically about the song "Meant to Live," which I think is a good place to really kind of encapsulate what this album's all about. I think that the post 9/11 comment is really apt. I mean, you think about this record came out in 2003. It was very much an environment where a lot of American music was kind of just suffused in that post 9/11 atmosphere. It was difficult to get away from it. And admittedly, Switchfoot are certainly one of the bands that tackle that subject with perhaps a little more of a distance from the immediacy of it. Like these aren't like songs where you're like, what was that? We've definitely reviewed an album where like there's a song about the Evanescence album had a song about like falling from the towers or whatever. Anyway, so this is like
nothing of that caliber.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and just because it is Christian, by the way, I want to give this band just a modicum of credit and say that they do approach this. Well, I mean, overall, The Beautiful Letdown, in a word, is an album that is about disillusionment. It's about considering yourself from a distance from other people, from normalcy, from tragedy to some extent, which I think is what Meant to Live as a song is about. I will go no further than that.
Yeah, no, I think that's an astute observation.
They're not, let's go kill all the people in the desert or put a boot in your ass. This is the American way.
Bomb the brown people.
Quite. What I wanted to say was I have a quote here from John Foreman about the song, and I think it's quite telling. And it tells you, I think, everything you need to know about the way he approaches songwriting, the kind of artist he considers himself to be, and the level of depth and nuance that you can expect in this music. Quote, a while back, I read a T.S. Eliot poem called The Hollow Men.
Oh, boy.
The imagery in this poem continues to haunt me. We are the hollow men. We are the stuffed men. I look at our planet and I see a horrible, beautiful world where love and hate breathe the same air. This is where we wake up every day. This is where we live. Something deep inside of me yearns for the beautiful, the true. I want more than what I've been sold. I want to live life.
Yeah, that about sums it up. The thing is that when it comes to the construction of the lyricism on stuff like this, and songs throughout this album, is that the hooks here, pretty decent, honestly. Stuff that you remember. However, when you look in between the really memorable stuff, you find things that are maybe a bit more questionable. One of the lyrics, I think that it could have come from that speech that you just read, which was dreaming about providence and whether mice or men have second tries. I am not even going to try to begin why the of mice and men references here. I'm really not. It's maybe we've been living with our eyes half open. Maybe we're bent and broken. It's almost close enough to being like Maynard James Keenan-y, like that first song off of 10,000 Days where Maynard is just like, everybody's watching TV and we're all evil. Like, it's really, really close to that. It's not quite there, but it's really close.
What I want to say is, I don't know if this is intentional or not. I think it's probably unintentional, because I think what he's talking about is, I'm talking about the song Ammunition for a second. And I think what he's talking about in the song is he's talking about like society, you know, he's talking about normal people and how we kind of need to come together, I suppose. But what's interesting about it is that if you take the chorus, if you discard the verses and you just take the chorus in isolation, like it reads as this like incredibly damning commentary on Bush and the Bush years. We've been blowing up. We're the issue. It's our condition. We've been blowing up. We're the issue. Our detonation. We're ammunition. We are the fuse and ammunition. Like a scathing critique of American imperialism and foreign interventionism right here, right? And then you read the verses and you realize this is not a commentary on America, on the American identity, but it's a commentary on the fact that you can blame it on your politicians, you can blame it on your religions, but it's our fault. You know, it's this. It's amazingly.
He's so close to making a good point. Like he's so genuinely close, and then he just stopped, like mid-sentence.
And I've got another quote from the same interview, which was an interview in 2015 that he did with a website called Thought Co. And it was a retrospective on this album, and so he's got lots of quotes about all the songs on it. Here's another one. The quote: Einstein said, without belief
I've heard this quote,
in the inner harmony of the world, there would be no science. Maybe, I say, without the dissonance of our modern age, there would be no rock and roll. There lies the tension between the harmony and the dissonance. We're the problem. We're the issue.
Oh, American
This is a tune
idiot.
that feels really great to play live. Step on a distortion pedal and scream about the dissonance.
and this is about adding to the noise, correct?
No,
that's about ammunition.
But adding to the noise.
Oh, that's about ammunition.
Adding to the noise is the epitome of exactly what we're talking about.
You can
the title tells you everything.
You can see how I would get confused because it's that same. It's exactly what I was talking about the affirmations of positivity of this album feeling like bullshit upon scrutiny, where you dig into it and the lyrical commentary ends up just being so simplistic and almost victim blamey, like
on your stereo, radio, video. You mean like the radio I'm listening to your music on?
August,
that one?
Jake, what you're forgetting is that we are the symphony of modern humanity. From the third world to the corporate ear. Tell us what we want to hear, but none of these sound bites are coming in clear. You know what I mean?
Miracle,
Side,
man.
Bottom text.
So let it never be said that John Theodore, or whatever his name is not consistent throughout this record.
Theodore.
At least in his approach.
No, he is consistently shit.
Yeah, but his thesis carries across, right? God. I've got my hands at Redemption's side, whose scars are bigger than these doubts of mine. So you have here, this acknowledgement that he's close to the breakthrough he wants to make, but redemption scars. Something. So there's something, about. So
there, you're getting to the heart of it. Is that it's about something that this band and this album get credit for trying. But they also have to take credit for the fact that this is nothing but empty half measures. Like I respect this band for thinking and trying to put something out there that's a little bit more substantive than maybe what a lot of other people were thinking of, because clearly it infiltrated to an audience that was listening to songs that were not as self-critical as this music is. And the moments on here where it leans into that, like Ammunition, like adding to the noise, easily are the moments where musically and maybe like structurally, it can be fine, it can be good, it can be catchy, but it weighs it down with meaningless fluffy nonsense. The moments on this album that I think tip over into working are two kinds of moments, and really two separate kinds of song, that being the biggest single and the biggest song on this album, and maybe one of the biggest songs in this genre, which is Dare You to Move, and the song Gone. This is simultaneously where the album takes itself the most seriously and the least seriously. But on Dare You to Move, everything is really focused kind of inward. It's really about self-motivation. It's a song that's not very complicated, and it's a bit repetitive too. But honestly, the motivational vibe and inspirational vibe that they're going for, I think is more or less achieved. I think it's a decent song. It's a moment on the album that I guess comparatively speaking, I look forward to. I still think it's catchy. Just the chorus is really great. And it feels unpretentious in a way that the rest of the album doesn't really get away with. But Gone is the moment on the album where I really feel like if this was the attitude adopted by bands like this, I would genuinely look a bit more fondly on them, just because it's A, not taking itself super seriously, and B, sounds a little bit more musically invigorated than the rest of it, just because you can feel multiple points of influence on here. The worst moments on here production wise, other than the messier mixes, is just kind of the moments where they really rely on like borderline trip hop instrumentals into their songs, and it's just kind of like, oh boy, this sounds like it was made in 2002. The moments where it's more successful are on here, where it's just kind of poppy and fluffy, and it's again,
when they're making
a song called Gone, it's basically a Blink-182 song.
When they're making like what is ostensibly just pop rock, I mean, I think it sounds fine because they really have an avenue where they can just lean into the sheer like fun you should actually be having while listening to this music, rather than leaving you like
yesterday is
gone,
So
like history. Like
cool.
that's a fun chorus.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit. I mean, the fucking U2 line, that's stupid, but who cares? The song's fun. I don't give a shit.
So it is a fun song, and I agree it's the best song on here musically. It has a catchiness, and like it does feel like it reminds me of a particular time that I am familiar with, like, you know, particular, because I didn't experience the landscape that this music existed in, but I did experience it in terms of media. Like, it reminds me of like 2000s, like Adam Sandler comedies, and like just these kind of like specific brand.
You would see this in like a needle drop into the opening montage of a 5 out of 10 comedy.
Where and the same comedy is going to have open with like the scene of the main character like skateboarding to work is exactly what this involves.
But I will say, it's funny that this is like the most charming song here, because also I think it's one of the worst lyrically. Like I'm sorry,
it probably is.
I cannot.
I don't.
I cannot excuse half of what's going on here. She told him she'd rather fix her makeup than try to fix what's going on, but the problem keeps on calling, even with the cell phone gone. She told him that
I
she
love
believes
that
in
line
living.
so much.
She told him that she believes in living bigger than she's living now, but her world keeps spinning backwards and upside down. It's all like very cheap and stupid and dumb until you get to the outro of the song. And yeah, August has already alluded to the Bono line, which is terrible, but it's
like
far
Frank
from the
Sinatra
only.
gone.
It's far
like
from
Elvis and his
mom. Like all Al Pacino's
what
cash.
does his mom have to do with any of this shit, man?
It's like fucking word salad. He's just coming up with shit that's on the top of his mind, and like Elvis, mom's Al Pacino shit. Yeah, that's in the song.
Pacino's cash line has laid dormant in my brain for years, where I remembered this line, but not what song it was from. And I always periodically throughout the last like 10 years of my life have gone like, man, what's that line from? And then it just disappears from my head. So I finally figured it out that it was a goddamn Switchfoot song.
Shout out to the part where John Franklin, or whatever his name is, rhymes life is more than money. Time was never. He rhymes money with money. And that's, I think, one of the moments where I felt like someone had bored a hole into my head and was just kind of like pouring this stuff into it. Like, We got information in the information age, but do we know what life is outside of our convenient Lexus
Our
cages?
convenient Lexus cage.
He said, live like no tomorrow. Every moment that we borrow brings us closer to the God who's not short of cash. It's a nice little callback to Al Pacino line there. Hey, Bono, I'm glad you asked. Life is still worth living. Life is more than you are. Sick burn on Bono there.
For all of its faults lyrically, I think the reason that we might be a little bit more willing to forgive it is that I do like the sentiment of the don't live like you're immortal, live like your life is something to lose kind of thing. It's like, it's one of the few moments where thematically they actually say something that's like, okay, that I agree with. You say it in the most clunky way possible, but
Like,
I get
no,
it.
I mean, it's a graspable moment. Even if the sentiment is clunky, I think the hook is still very fun and memorable.
Oh yeah.
And also, like, I think the progression of this song is actually pretty good. I like the way the energy builds up and climaxes. I think it's actually satisfying. There's other tracks on this album where they lack the basic competence, for song structure, a pretty fucking essential part of music. And here's, a moment where they kind of get it down in a really satisfying way.
It's why the Foo Fighters comp doesn't work all the way, is because they are masters of the fundamentals of song construction, and they knew what to do with their tunes and hooks and catchiness. And it's why this band isn't as good as that band, even though they're clearly trying to evoke them.
Just to kind of move it along so we can get started on this second album, there's one more song I want to talk about that we haven't mentioned at all yet. That to me is kind of emblematic of all the things that I hate about this kind of music, this sort of personality, this entire world, right? And it's actually the last song on this record, 24.
24.
Which is just like, okay, so this is, look, it would be hypocritical of me to come after John Footman or whatever his name is for writing a song about himself and about like how he's grown and about where he is in his life and all that sort of thing. Because a lot of my favorite songwriters write shit like that. I mean, being a songwriter, being a frontman of a rock band is an inherently egotistical thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. But this shit sucks. All of the fucking 24 allusions to, I got 24 reasons, I'm still 24 strong, 24 hours ago. He's had as many years in his life as there are hours in a day. Do you understand the significance of that, man? Like, I recently turned 25. And so to a certain extent, I can relate to some of the sentiments that are expressed in this song. I kind of get where he's coming from. He wants to see miracles. He wants to see the world change. He wrestles with an angel for more than a name. I get that to a certain extent, right? But also, like, fuck off.
As someone who is 24, yeah, I mean, this song is just like the whole 24 thing. Again, it gave me big Chance the Rapper 5-year plan vibes. Except that was done with more emotional authenticity than this was, frankly. But
here's a quote. Here's a quote from John Frusciante, or whatever his name is. I wrote this song near the end of my 24th year on this planet. Wherever we run, wherever the sun...
Why does he have to phrase it like that?
Wherever we run, wherever the sun finds us when he rises. Interesting gendering of the sun there. We remain stuck with ourselves. That can be overwhelming. Sometimes I feel like my soul is polluted with politicians, each with a different point of view, with all 24 of them in disagreement. Each voice is yelling to be heard. And so I am divided against myself. I've heard that truth will set you free. And that's what I'm living for. Freedom of spirit. I find unity and peace in none of the diversions that this world offers, but I've seen glimpses of truth. And that, my fellow Americans, is where I want to run. He doesn't say that.
I was literally about to say you sound like a drunk man giving a presidential speech, like his acceptance speech. Like he's up there like, I'm 24 and a son who's non-binary, I think. I don't know if I can know what his deal is.
Intercontinental ballistic tweets.
Like this man is the kind of guy who wakes up in the morning and then his wife like looks at him and he's just like, did you sleep well, honey? And just like, honey, I slept better than any man has ever slept last night. In my soul, I felt content for the first time in my life.
I truly understand the meaning of sleeping well now. To sleep well is not
sleep
to
that comes
rest.
without melatonin, the pure human spirit sleep.
Type a motherfucker who said, I slept. You know why I slept well? Because I got to wake up in America. The land of the free.
And the home of the brave.
This album is protected by the First Amendment. Suck a dick.
No, he wouldn't tell someone to suck a dick. I think he's a little too like saltine cracker white for that. I think he'd be like, butter my biscuits. You better go to the timeout corner.
That went a little bit Heath Ledger's Joker there for a second. Butter my biscuits. I want to tell you about the 9/11
Marmalade on my biscuits.
So, should we give this album our favorite tracks and ratings on that?
Oh, I think so.
All right, Jake, you kick us off.
God. All right. My favorite songs on here: "Dare You to Move," "Gone," and the title track, "The Beautiful Letdown." Least favorite song on here, "Adding to the Noise." I'd also say that I don't really care for "More Than Fine" either. In a similar way, it's one of those two songs, but just because "More Than Fine" has a shitty instrumental. But I give the album the epitomized 5 out of 10.
All right, August.
Yeah. So my favorites here are going to be "Gone." "Dare You to Move." Oh, maybe "Meant to Live." I mean, I've only got so much I can work with here, so forgive me. Least favorite, "Adding to the Noise," gets a hearty 4 out of 10 from me.
All right, my 2 favorite songs are "Gone," "Beautiful Letdown."
Where'd they go?
And probably "This Is Your Life," I guess. It's kind of cool, like musically, even though the lyrics are shit. The worst song is "Adding to the Noise," but the song I hate the most is 24. It just made me so mad for some reason. Like I don't know. Fuck this album. 4 out of 10. Which means we have an average rating for Switchfoot's "The Beautiful Letdown" of 4.3.
On the opposite side of the spectrum, we have Skillet, Tennessee rock band led by one Mr. John C. And this band has been active since 1996. And generally speaking,
still active, released an album this year,
which has their lowest review score of any album they've ever released, with a 1.8, which is I mean, that's something. The thing is, though, is that, like I mentioned earlier, is that I think that most people, if they are familiar with Skillet, not from the radio, which they were far less popular than a band like Switchfoot, just because they were a little bit more aggro, a little bit more heavy, but you could still find them even on alternative rock stations just because they had that crossover appeal. That kind of, I would say that there's a fundamental component of their sound that's essential to understanding them, in a sense that every lyric they say or every idea that they allude to in some respect involves Jesus, but they never say it, but you can always count on him implicitly being there. You'll get what I mean when we go into it. But basically, "Awake" follows Comatose, which Comatose had a couple of successful singles, but this was like their moment where they had a couple successful songs on here that you could either find on the radio or you could find them in anime music video core. And let me set the record straight for the moment that just because Skillet make the same kind of music for the same kind of audience as bands like Evanescence and bands like Linkin Park, in no way are they comparable in the admittedly tentative qualities that those bands are. But we talked about Linkin Park's Meteora and Evanescence's Fallen, and we were fairly kind to both of those. At least in terms of certain songs, we can at least admit that they made products that were ratra good, even if they have
Meteora is unequivocally a really good album, like a borderline great
album.
Yeah.
No, I would say, I mean, hell, I think like Linkin Park's catalog is genuinely very good. At least those first two albums are genuinely quite good because, and this is going back to an earlier point I made about the bullshittery feeling of these kinds of records, in that Linkin Park's music comes from a very obvious, evident place of people who are suffering with real emotional issues and unpacking them in a way that is sensible to that kind of emotional state, is what I will say.
Well, also just there's talented musicians in that band. Like, it's as simple as that, really. Like, I believe, I'm sure all of these bands suffer. I'm sure all of them have people who've gone through some fucking pain, because haven't we fucking all? Like, I'm sure it's hard, you know, and I'm not even being sarcastic there, although I sound it. I'm sure that like a lot of these bands who decide to make this kind of music approach that from a place of sincerity and genuineness. Now, I think I need to make that clear, because I feel like there's a sense in which people on the internet have ragged on music like this for that element of it, for that kind of bleeding heart sincerity of it, for that kind of like, I'm in pain kind of thing about it. And the problem, and the thing that's important to appreciate, is that the problem with this shit, the problem with the most derivative, boring of this style of music, it is the fact that there's no tangible sincerity that's coming through. It's all just completely filtered through the most meaningless, you know, renditions of these feelings. Like the genuineness, the genuineness doesn't come through because there's no sense of personality or identity or like actual meaningful distinction within the music. There's no personhood within this album. And that's not me saying that John Cooper is not a person or is a nobody or whatever. It's just me saying that if he wants to actually get through emotionally to me, then he needs to frankly try harder, because this is, I don't think I can, like, we talked about a lot of bad music on this podcast, and it's hard for me to reach a certain level again and again and again and again whenever we do it, because I feel like I have to, you know, convey my hatred on this certain level that makes it clear, like, oh, how fucking serious is this time? It's that bad. But I need you all to know this is my least favorite thing that we've ever reviewed formally on this podcast.
Yes.
This is the worst album that we've ever given a full segment review to on this podcast. One of the worst albums I've ever heard in my life, and not really for interesting reasons, which is doubly unfortunate, although there's a lot to laugh at. So I guess that's why we're here talking about it. It's the worst album that we've heard, that we've reviewed, in my opinion, purely because it has the highest ratio of absolutely god-awful songs to, you know, not god-awful songs, which is to say 1 to 0, because everything on this album is like the most bottom of the barrel bad on a musical level. Wait, on a lyrical level.
So we've talked about bands who, like, we throw the phrase around, never miss a lot. This band has like the fucking aim of Dick Cheney. This band is so bad.
So,
Okay,
Jake, why
I-
is this
I
band
gotta
so
say-
much worse than not Square Pusher, fucking Switchfoot?
You
I mean, this
fool!
is a band worse than Square Pusher. I will give you that. However, I gotta say is that if you notice something, if you listen to everything that Riley just said, you know, bar the this is the worst album, is that basically everything that they said, we said about 3 Days Grace's 1X, which I think of the albums in this vein that we have talked about is the most comparable album to this, mainly because of its failings. That being is that when we talked about that album, and keep in mind, when we talked about this stuff, I like to think that we have been more than generous when it comes to meeting this shit halfway. Me especially, I'm somebody who really likes to meet shit halfway and find something enjoyable about this, be it because of my nostalgia or just be it because of my willingness to try and find something salvageable about a bad experience. That said, the 3 Days Grace album failed and fell flat on its face for a couple reasons. But the main one was because the writing was just so bad. Every line was a cliche. Every single thing about it is that the pain and anger of this entire situation, it came from a genuine place, and you could feel that in the performances and in the heaviness, but you couldn't feel it lyrically. When I say that every sentiment, every line on this album falls flat in far worse ways than the 3 Days Grace album does, I mean it. When I say there's not even a salvageable song on Awake. Not a single one I could think of and go like, oh, you know, you could change a couple elements of this and it would be good. If another fundamentally good band came and like covered this, you could try and fix it. I am adamant that that is impossible. This album has a grand total of 2 songs that I would rate above a 2 out of 10. And they're not much higher than that rating, to be frank. But I am someone who grew up listening to songs like Monster because I heard them in anime music videos and what have you. And frankly, it's a great place to start with Hero. One of the 3 best songs on the album, in my opinion, which is to say it's god-awful. That said, this is the most fundamentally hilarious example of the parenthetical but Jesus aspect to their sound. Because when they're singing about a hero will save me just in time, that hero is Jesus. I need you to understand this.
Jesus, it's God,
Jesus.
it's the Holy Spirit, it's whoever the hell you want it to be.
It's your local clergyman, it's the cardinal, it's the pope, it's someone with some minor religious affiliation, because my God, that's a funny thing, is that the way this contrasts with the Switchfoot album is interesting, because you have a song like Dare Me to Move, which is a song that's all about self-motivation and wanting yourself to go forward. I'm going to ignore the fact that that just happened, and I'm going to keep talking so I can make my point. But that whole album is about disillusionment and trying to pick yourself up and dust yourself off and move forward. And thematically, this album is so vague in its struggles that I don't care how bad, like maybe this was written about some kind of addiction or in the throes of some kind of crisis. It doesn't come off in the lyrics, but my God, this album is so insufferably whiny. Hero is a song that's just about everything sucks, so I hope someone fixes it for me. I hope Jesus comes and saves me. It's so spineless. It has nothing behind
spineless
it.
is a fucking perfect word for this album. Because here's the thing. The illusion of this album being heavy, and I'm kind of jumping ahead here, gets completely shattered after Monster. Because this album is like, what's so funny is on like Apple Music, this is branded as hard rock. Like this is hard rock in the same way that, like, I don't know, the fucking solo stuff from Eric Clapton is fucking blasted and weak and wimpy, quite frankly.
Every song on here is like, we shat on the 3 Days Grace albums very specifically for the song Riot. I am here to tell you every song on this album is just Riot. Literally what Monster is. Like, that is the exact same fucking song. You cannot convince me otherwise.
Yeah, I was gonna say Monster is
Monster has the funniest moment on this record, and maybe of any record ever. Please tell me you know what I'm talking about. But it's the final third of the song where he goes monster
Feel like a monster.
There's like a couple seconds of this song where I think it kind of has a bit of energy. Like there's a moment during the chorus that leads up to the verse where he's like, and I can't contain it. And the riff kind of goes along with the vocal melody. And I'm like, that's okay. That's like the closest thing to a sensible idea on this track. But the problem here is the production on the heavier songs on this album sounds so farty. It sounds like just farts.
You can't convince me there's an organic instrument on this. This sounds entirely like it was made from Pro Tools. And no, Pro Tools is not inherently bad, but it is bad if it sounds like it comes from that. They're just like, oh, let's just put a guitar tone here, just a. Let's just put it here. It's because it's like down tune it a little bit. It is incredible how this band manages to find a way to make a song that has different lyrics and words in all of them, but none of them actually mean anything. Because like beyond wanting someone to save you, pray tell, what is Hero about? Because he says, I'm just a step away, I'm just a breath away, losing my faith today, falling off the edge today, I'm just a man, not superhuman.
I mean, if
save you from fucking what, my guy?
it is so thoroughly entertaining in its cheesy caveman banging rocks together expression of what it's trying to get across. Like I love the opening lyrics of the secret side of me I never let you see. I keep it caged, but I can't control it.
Oh my god. I mean, it's literally the song amounts to save me from the boogeyman.
It's so simple and like it's reducing something to its most base elements that you kind of have to admire it as a piece of like minimalist art.
I mean, like every lyric on the song boils down to there is a monster in my head. He's bad. All of them. It's just like he's secret. He's secret. Beyond the opening 1-2 punch of Hero and Monster, you get Don't Wake Me, which at least gets my point for the most immediately funny song on this album, which is just like you have these two ragers of songs comparatively, and then immediately just this soft acoustic strain.
Oh, it's so funny.
In bed, I was thinking about you.
I love that. I love that moment so much because it's such a jarring like shift in instrumental tone.
Funny thing about this too is trying to play a game, which is he talking about Jesus or an ex-girlfriend? You read the lyrics to this and it's just kind of like, because it really could be either. It really could.
Jesus is the ex that he desperately wants to get back together with, but she's like changing her number. Anyway, I think the only way for me to talk about this record in any kind of substantive or interesting way, because I can't. These songs are. There's one song that I do want to talk about, but I'm going to save it because I think it would be better for me to finish my thoughts on. But for the most part, I can't really talk about the song. It's pointless to me. You guys are doing a great job with that. But if I am to kind of tunnel any meaning out of this cesspool of despair that I'm in right now, is to try and thread the thesis of this video back together again, which is why are we talking about these two albums together, and what is the juxtaposition between the Switchfoot record in 2003 and the Skillet record in 2009 tell us about Christian radio rock and the progression of Christian radio rock across this decade, right? So we began. Well, okay, so we certainly didn't start with, a record that was represented like the birth of it or anything. Like Christian radio rock, it was established, you had, a lot of Christian rock music kind of proliferating in the early 2000s, but Switchfoot are a great representation of the, maximal commercial success of that, the maximal kind of crossover appeal of that. It's not too, distorted and loud and to freak people out. It's got this maximal sort of like, wide mainstream appeal. And it has this sense of musicality. It has a sense of character to it that I don't find much stock in, but hey, we were able to talk about moments like Gone. We were able to celebrate those little aspects of the record that do give us this kind of feeling of sort of a little bit of gleeful nostalgia, and that kind of you can understand where the affection that people have for a band like Switchfoot comes from, even if I feel incredibly distanced from that. And then we get to Skillet. So Skillet, 6 years later, we've gone from, you know, the year of the Iraq War beginning, or like I think 2003 was when that happened, and we've gone through the entire Bush era, and we've gotten to 2009, the year of the inauguration of Barack Obama. So we've gone from the kind of beginning of the Bush era, the kind of halcyon days, the specific post 9/11 era where he was like, you know, 90% approval rating and whatever. Like the country was healing, was trying to find a way to heal, was trying to figure out, you know, how to kill as many brown people as possible in order to feel better. Like that was the era we were existing in then. And now we've moved all the way through to the end of the Bush era. So all of the luster of that time, all of the kind of glorious, you know, beauty of like invading other countries and killing people has kind of like the shine of that has kind of worn off. It's still happening, of course, but, you know, collectively, consciously, the American consciousness is in a different place, right? We're in a recession. Mm-hmm. So we're in a new kind of darker era that's less about, I guess, collectivism, and we're more kind of sinking into an individualistic time, right? And so you have a record here, I think, that reflects that in the sense that the Switchfoot album is very much about how we all need to kind of like, you know, band together and be as one in order to make it through. Whereas here you have an album that's all about like the individual suffering and like the kind of like curdling poison of my monstrous insides or whatever, right? Like, so that's, I think, one way in which you can kind of see how Christian rock has maybe shifted in terms of popular Christian rock, as we've moved away from that collective, like, you know, truly what feels like traditional Christian values, and you've moved towards a kind of Christianity that's more and more warped by American exceptionalism, American imperialism, the American individualist ideal, right? I know how I sound. This is the only way I can get through this. So here we have this new era of, you know, and it's reflected in a lot of things. It's not even just in Christian rock music, but I think it's an interesting way of zeroing in on it, right? And so here you have, similarly, where as you've curled away from a kind of collectivist, you know, mass appeal type thing with Switchfoot, you have moved in towards an individualist, introspective thing that also has slightly less mass appeal, that's also kind of more outwardly tortured, that I think also speaks more to people, a narrower kind of audience. And to me, I see a lot of narrowing in terms of how this music is marketed and directed. And so, yeah, and that's where we get to a record that not only loses its mass appeal factor in a lot of ways, but also in its, you know, severe narcissism. And to be honest, like, yeah, this is an introspective record, but what makes it insufferable is not just that it's about, oh, I'm suffering so much, but it's also about how, you know, it's not me, it's you. It's about how I'm suffering so much, but the cause of all my problems is every fucking shitty person around me who's not as good as I am. Right? That's also the vibe that comes through here. And that's also why I find this particularly distasteful. And look, there's nothing wrong with rock music that is to a certain extent kind of self-absorbed, self-consumed. Like a lot of it is that way. I kind of said that before, how it's kind of an inherently egotistical thing to be the front man of a rock band. But here it's like, whatever his name is, Howard motherfucker, no, that's the producer, John Cooper Clarke, whatever his name is, he's leaning into this aspect of, you know, my tortured inside is because of the fact that no one understands me and no one gets me. And in comparison to, and also the fact that everyone wants to fucking stab me in the back. And, you know, my bitch wants to fucking fuck me over, and she's she doesn't know what she's missing, man. You should have when you could have. You're out with your fucking friends. How can you have fucking friends when I'm here needing you to suck my dick and you're up with fucking friends? And you could have had it so good. You could have been in like the best kitchen in the world, man. But you just have to fucking, you gotta go out there and get friends.
Sam Hunt, is that you?
Now who's gonna clean up when it hits the fan? Not me. You tried to keep
shit
me,
hits the fan. Will you still be?
you tried to keep me on your leash. It's time you started chasing me. Like, okay, so yeah. And so between that song and It's Not Me, It's You, the level of narcissism and just kind of like implicit self-hatred that is rendered through like an outward hatred of and distrust of women, of other people in his lives, whatever. Like that suffuses this fucking record. You have songs like One Day Too Late, where it's this really facile kind of like, it's the most Switchfoot-esque song here in a certain sense spiritually, because it's about like how we can make the world better, man. We can like, it's not too late to make it change. But unlike with Switchfoot, it feels so hypocritical here. It feels so like completely self-absorbed and self-interested and even more hollow. Like, this is what I want to get across here. This is not just hollow because it's full of cliches, right? Lots of bad music, lots of fine music, lots of mediocre music can be full of cliches. It's the fact that the cliches don't even land because they're so laced with hypocrisy. They're so laced with the most self-indulgent bullshit that I've ever fucking heard in my life. I cannot believe that people fucking listen to this sincerely. Like, Awake and Alive, I think, is maybe one of the most egregious examples on the whole record. I fucking despise this song with all of my being. I'm at war with the world, and they try to pull me into the dark. I struggle to find my faith as I'm slipping from your arms. When my faith is getting weak, I feel like giving in. You breathe into me again.
That was a Freudian slip right there.
Like, come on, dude. And it gets the worst part of it. The worst part of this entire record. They save it for the end, man, because the last two tracks on this thing, when you think the shit sandwich can't get any more wretched. First, I'm going to talk about Never Surrender, and then put a fucking bullet in Lucy, because I've got a big segment on Lucy I'm going to get to. Never Surrender. Right? Do you know what it's like when you're scared to see yourself? Do you know what it's like when you wish you were someone else? Here is the height. Here is the fucking height of John fucking Columbus's hypocrisy, right? We've had this whole fucking album where about how the pain is inside of me because no one understands me, no one tries to get through to me, and my women all leave me, and no one seems to give a shit, man. And here he has the gall, he has the fucking decency to pretend that not only is he not a narcissistic piece of shit, but actually, in fact, he wishes he was someone else. No one has the shitty life that he has. No one suffers the way that he does. No one knows what it's like to be the bad man, to be the sad man behind Aryan eyes. No one understands it, man. No one gets it. No one gets me. And someone needs to come here and pull me back together and know what it's like to want to surrender, to be your own worst enemy. You know, maybe in some ways it's telling. Maybe actually I'm getting this all wrong. Maybe this is the moment where he steps back from all of this fucking blaming the world and realizes that he actually is the source of all of his fucking pain. Maybe that's what it is, but it's certainly not how it comes across. Oh, God. And then we have Lucy, all right? So I can't be the only one who has serious thoughts on Lucy, right? Like,
oh my gosh.
So
Lucy is like, this is the shit cake on the top of the album. It's so beautiful.
I've been on a journey with this song, all right? So the first time I heard it, it's obvious, okay? He's singing to some girl who passed away. Hey, Lucy, I remember your name. I left a dozen roses on your grave today. I've got some things I need to say. Now that it's over, I just want to hold her, give up with this world to see the little piece of heaven looking back at me. Okay. So obviously, you know, John Congleton has lost this perfect piece of ass that kept him sane or whatever. He's some special girl in his life, like, right? So that's clear. That's obvious. And then you get the second verse, which kind of actually complicates this a little bit. He says, hey, Lucy, I remembered your birthday. They said it to bring some closure to say your name. I know I'd do it all different if I had the chance. And so you're like, okay, so, all right. Yeah, you know.
Perhaps this was a relationship that went sour and she died before like they could have time to amend it.
Yeah,
That's the vibe you get so far.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the way that it continues. Me and Lucy walking hand in hand. Me and Lucy never want to end. Just another moment in your eyes will see you in another life in heaven where we never say goodbye. So, we have all of this bullshit, right? And then I go onto the Genius page when I listen to this for the second time, and I read the backstory to this song. And I'm going to quote this entire segment because I think it's beautiful, and you can experience in real time what I experienced reading this while listening to this song for the second time.
Oh, it's so good.
The song is based on a true story. It's about a young couple who finds out that they're pregnant. They are in high school. They're not married, and they are absolutely scared to death of the implications. Because, Christian. What happens if the people find out? And how to take care of this baby? They don't know what to do. And basically, the only option that they think they have just to get away from this problem was to terminate the pregnancy. Gasps all around. How could they think this was their only option to terminate the pregnancy? My God. So they do that. And of course, they're young. They thought that all their problems were over, that everything gets better now. Look, I don't know if this is like a misquote, but it literally says everything get better now. Nobody have to find out. But after that, they start to feel guilty. They couldn't get over and finally decides to see a counselor. And he suggests to them, stop thinking as a medical proceeding and begin to think of this as a death in a family. So this couple decides to do a small funeral to this child and call her Lucy. And then the last part of this, it's a song about the beginning of John and Corey's relationship. So there we go. That's supposed to be the twist, I suppose, that it's actually about John. Like the true story of the young couple is him, right? So
the double knot here, the icing on the cake is that from the context of this album, let's think about it. A Christian album about a young couple, about a woman who is pregnant and she is afraid of the implications. She doesn't know if she can get married or not. And you realize, oh wait, they're doing a parallel to fucking Jesus. They're doing a Jesus parallel is something you have to come to the realization of at some point.
Yes.
And it is so funny because then we assert that back onto this being a true story about John himself, and it becomes the most galaxy-brained, egotistical thing ever.
And here's the takeaway. August, listen to me. Every single, Jake, you too, fucking listen up. Every single little aborted baby is like Jesus. And every time you do an abortion, you're killing a Jesus. This is what the liberals don't want you to know.
Here's another thing the liberals don't want you to know is that all the uncircumcised babies are in God's closest circle. That's from fucking one of those epic poems.
I'd like to point out very briefly here that this album is mastered by someone who mastered Pleased to Meet Me by The Replacements, Around the Fur by Deftones, and several other canonical records from Billy Joel. Why does this all sound so bad? Like, I get you can't fundamentally fix a lack of talent, but I mean, my God, would it have really taken that much more to put an ounce of kick or heft into these instrumentals? Just a little bit. Instead, they just sound like fried anus the whole time, the whole way through the album. It's funny that you say that this is like hypocritical, because it really is because when you examine like the meanings of the songs and how like aggressively self-pitying it is and how someone needs to save him from all this stuff, and it's got to be Jesus, and you're trying to ask for to save you, you're a monster, you've got a monster inside you, And yet the other part of it is so blanketly like, you're really missing out on not having me in your life, even though I spend half of this album talking about the fact that I'm a literal fucking monster. But you're the one who sucks for leaving me. You're the one who sucks. Can we talk for a moment about It's Not Me, It's You?
That song's so skin
with
crawling.
apologies to Mr. Jack White, this is the worst artificial guitar sound I've ever heard. At the very beginning of it, it's just that and it's like it's trying to have like this, that symphonic rock like heft behind it, and oh man, it really, really doesn't have it. And then there's just the fucking, let's get the story straight. You were a poison. Flooded through my veins. You left me broken. Tried to make me think that all the blame was all on me with the pain that you put me through. And now I know that it's not me, it's you. Parenthetical you. It's not me, it's you. Always has been you. All the lies and stupid things you say and do. It's you. It's not me, it's you. All the pain and lies you put me. He says it over and over and over again.
Is it me or you?
And like he has the audacity. The first fucking 4 songs really are just about this self-pitying garbage and how you're secretly a monster. But no, the person who you broke up with, they're definitely wrong for leaving you, even though you're talking about how you have a fucking demon in your ball sack or whatever. Fucking pairing Don't Wake Me and Awake and Alive right after each other are real smart sequencing.
And I miss you all the time, and I need you.
I think that my least favorite song here probably Should Have When You Could Have. I don't entirely know why. I'm kind of like,
it's just the most annoying song on
like,
here, Jake. You shut up.
It really is.
When you cut up.
Oh, yes.
You're gonna miss my love, girl. You should. It would have been so good. Like, again, I made the fucking Sam Hunt joke. This is just what's on Southside. You should have when I would have. Now I know I've had enough. Better luck next time, girl. So I guess this is canonically the ex-girlfriend and not Jesus, unless he believes in a gender-bent Jesus, which would be a really strange line in the sand to draw, but whatever. I'm done chasing you all over. May as well be chasing after thunder.
One song we haven't shouted out that I just think is really funny because it's one of the songs that most leans into the Christian angle is Forgiven, which is a song about how Jesus saved him. And what I love about this, what's the funniest aspect of this song, is that it's presented as though he's singing to a lover that he's betrayed. Forgive me now because I have been unfaithful. Don't ask me why, because I don't know. So many times I've tried, but I was unable. But this heart belongs to you alone. Like, he has all of these lyrics in this song that are so clearly meant to make you think about a sexual relationship, right? Where he's fucked up and he's done something wrong. And you think for a second, you might even think for a split second, right? Are we actually going to get some accountability on this record? Like, are we actually gonna get some, okay, maybe I was a bit of a dick in the relationship too? And this comes right after that run of songs, like, where it's about, it's not me, it's you, should have when you could have, blah, blah, blah. And then you realize he's singing about God. And he's singing about how God is the one who's forgiven him. And God is the one who his heart belongs to. And God is the one who he's been unfaithful to. And God is the one that he gets down on his knees and feels his love wash over me. Literal.
That line is so funny. It's so weird because by that point in the song you've already realized what it's about, and it's like, oh, I guess this is a very different kind of second coming.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally Bukkake me Jesus. Like, it's,
I mean, he even says, now I'm in our secret place alone in your embrace. First of all, I need to unpack how terrible of a lyric alone in your embrace is. Like, that is just factually incorrect. You either are or not. I'm not giving you artistic license here. And then just the concept of the secret place. It's just like, are you thinking about getting bukkakeed in church? Because I think that's what you're trying to say here, because I'm going to interpret it that way. It's so fucking like, this is so manic in its attitude of just being like, hero, of just being like, oh, I'm so bad, come and save me, monster. Oh, I've got the fucking semen bad in me or something. And then
the demons.
Yeah, and then it's just like, oh, this bitch left me and I hate her. And then Forgiven is just like, oh, but actually, sorry about all that, I guess. It's like, this is the world's least convincing redemption arc of all fucking time. Like, fuck you, dude. Bad
Oh my
Lieutenant,
God.
this is not.
I think it's really
Like,
funny when you kind of
Jesus.
realize, like, in retrospect, after you get to the end of the album with Lucy, that that Forgiven is probably a song about him getting the abortion. Anyway,
Oh, man.
I think
Jesus
I think
fucking
I'm about
Christ,
done with this.
literally.
Is there anything else that either of you want to shout out before we put this thing to bed?
There's something about it when an album manages to throw around its weight so aggressively in the bad department while having like it's like going and clubbing people with the world's largest empty bag. Like you're going it around so that it like drags them down, like not that it hurts them on impact, but just inconveniences them, which is I think the sort of modus operandi of this album, is that it exists with like fundamentally it has nothing beyond its skin, so it's just kind of a limp fucking, it's like a corpse without a skeleton, and so it's all just kind of flabby, and listening to it is like trying to throw it away. It's just greasy and there's nothing there, and then you just throw it away and you're just like, wow, I can't believe that one time I had to throw that skin in the trash. This is what I've been reduced to, is making this incredibly labored body horror comparison to try and convey just how bad listening to this shit is. And like I tried, like maybe I'd get some kind of Toby Mac Catch a Fire novelty out of it, where it's like, is this good? No. Do I enjoy it? Absolutely. There's nothing to enjoy here. Everything is so monochromatic and self-serious and dour, and it's just it's an album that maybe isn't the worst that we've talked about on here for me, but it's maybe just the most empty. It just has fundamentally nothing at its core, like just nothing but empty, vaguely kind of toxic word throwing. Like, you know, this is like the comparison I would make here is to like what we said about a Whole Lotta Red, where it's just like, it would be one thing if this was attuned to our sensibilities and still good, but it's both not what it's supposed to be and not what we like. And this is also a case of that, where it's, if it was better, it would be 3 Days Grace's 1X, where it would be listenable, where it would be fine and a good outlet for some adolescent rage. I don't know how anyone gets anything out of this, like at all. There's nothing here that is like, there's just more palatable, better versions of this exact safe level of hard rock music. And thus it is nothing.
Spending time with this album and talking about it, the Skillet record, has actually given me a newfound appreciation for not just Nickelback, but just all of the bands that is ripping off in general. Like, I have a nostalgia for 1X now. I'm going to go back and listen to 1X. I'm going to enjoy myself more than I ever have before, because I've experienced this. I have context.
This album lowered the floor.
No, but for real though, like one of the reasons I think I maybe don't, obviously when we reviewed 1X, I didn't have the nostalgia that you and Morgan had for it. I didn't have that level. So I was able to be a little bit more harsh on it and stuff. But now that I have more context for how bad this can get, I now have a renewed appreciation. So maybe, and I'm trying here to channel a hopeful, happy ending to this video with this point, which is that for all of this shit that we've been through, I feel that on some level, it's made me more appreciative of what we have. And in this godforsaken world, you've got to have faith in something. 1 out of 10.
I also think that, generally speaking, if you wonder why I might skew on this podcast more towards the positive side of the rating scale, it's because I've heard a lot of music that's just like this. So my threshold for bad is very well defined, thanks to albums like this.
So true.
Oh, God.
All right, let's rate this bad boy. So my 3 favorite tracks, and yeah, it's a 1 out of 10. Obviously.
No least favorite track?
Least favorite track is Lucy. It's a 1 out of 10 from me.
My 3 favorite tracks on here are gonna have to be I really like Monster, Hero, and what's another? It's not me, it's you. Really gets to like the deep misogynistic core that every man really has.
You can't
So I
hurt me
think
with
I
this.
think that's got to be one of my favorites.
Of course.
My least favorite song, it's gonna be
It's gonna be me.
it's gonna be Lucy.
It's been-
It- not for
Yeah,
any of the
yeah.
reasons I mentioned, but for the reason that I don't think it went far enough as a song. I think we needed I think we needed a fourth verse from the perspective of the abortion. That would have been
just
very,
like I'm burning. Ah!
Do you know that that's what they do in Catholic school? Is that this is a 100% true story about when I was in Catholic school. Hands to the God that I don't actually believe in.
Hand of God.
I was in a school, hand of God, and I was in a classroom, and we had religion class. So for about an hour every day, we'd have like a religion textbook, talk about the Bible, all that, fun
yeah.
hippy dippy shit. And we had a semester, my middle school, that was about like a course that was like family preparement or whatever the fuck. And like the way that my teacher talked about abortion in that was with such primal disdain that one of the girls in my class laughed at it, because obviously there was a lot of people in that classroom who did not agree. And as punishment, she made her read a card she found online that was a calendar of updates written from the perspective of an unborn fetus and how it was growing in the womb and what its mom and dad's voices sound like. And at the end, it ends with, "Today my mother killed me." This is a real experience that I had,
Oh my
and I
God.
have never forgotten it.
That's so funny. That's the funniest fucking thing I've heard all day. You know what? On the back of that, this album gets a fucking 8 out of 10 from me. What a fucking brilliant record. What a masterpiece.
Okay.
I guess I'll go. The 3 tracks on this album that are not a 0.5 or 1 out of 10 are Hero, Believe, which we didn't even talk about, which I think is the best song on here on virtue of it being the most anonymous, and One Day Too Late, I guess. Sure, fine, whatever. And my least favorites are Monster, Don't Wake Me, Awake and Alive, It's Not Me, It's You, Should Have When I Could Have, Should Have When You Could Have, Forgiven Sometimes, Never Surrender, and Lucy. This is a 1.5 out of 10.
All right.
How gratifying.
I have chosen to render August 8 as a 2 in reflection of
I was
this
going to do
rate your music, which means that this album has an average of 1.5. Let us know at home what you think of either of the albums we've discussed today, and also of the trend of Christian radio rock in general in the 2000s. Do you have a nostalgia for it? Is it all foreign to you like it is to me? What are your feelings on it? You might have a deeper connection to it than even all of us.
Give us some of your favorites. Maybe I'll consider them for another record club one day.
We do want to hear from you. We do want to hear what your takes are. So let us know in the comments. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, head on over to the YouTube link in the description and you can leave us a comment there as well. We have a new feature that we've enabled now where you can give us a super thanks, I think, and just leave it for a small donation. You can have your comment highlighted, obviously up to you, but if you want to indulge in that, then that would be most appreciated. We also have, of course, a join button on our page where you can, for just $1 a month, support the channel more directly, and you can become one of our besties. You get your name featured in the title crawl of every video on this channel. Plus, you get priority comment response. And if you want to recommend us music to listen to, your recommendation will go to the top of the pile. So that's there as well if you want to take advantage of that. But yeah, that's really all there is for it. I'm happy to be alive.
As always, folks, rock over London, rock on Chicago, Hallmark, when you care enough to send the very best.